Good evening and welcome to the 2015 Life Changes Be Ready webinar series. I'm your host Jim Thompson from LifeChangesBeReady.com. Our mission here at Life Changes Be Ready is to awaken individuals, families, and communities to the need for preparedness through education and training, while also providing access to premium products that aid in the pursuit of a lifestyle of self-reliance. Tonight, Cindy and I are going to share a little bit about who we are and where we are going in 2015 with the Life Changes Be Ready webinar series. Please feel free to contact us at info@lifechangesbeready.com to share your thoughts, comments, and suggestions for upcoming webinars as we move into 2015. All right, let's get started. Here's Cindy.
Hi guys, this is Cindy Thompson from LifeChangesBeReady.com and SummerSurvival.com. We thought we'd take a little bit of time here in the beginning of 2015 to tell you our story and to let you know where we see ourselves going with the webinars in 2015. You know, a lot of times we're asked, how did you get into this? How come you're doing webinars and expos, and you know, what are your personal preps like? So we wanted to address some of that so you can get to know us, the people behind the webinars, a little bit more, and we're just one of you. But let me tell you a little bit about ourselves. We started prepping in 1998, 1999. We were one of those families who did prepare for Y2K. Now, obviously there wasn't a big incident in Y2K, but I will tell you that that was our training ground. We've been grinding our own wheat since then, dehydrating our own food since then, canning our food, and doing a lot of things that we learned about and utilizing a lot of the equipment that we bought back then in our daily lives ever since then. Well, like a lot of families, we have 4 children and they were young at the time, so we got busy when, you know, the year 2000 passed and all. We got busy in our businesses and kind of put our preps aside. Well, we were involved in real estate full-time here in Florida, and I like to tell people that we were doing short sales before anybody really knew what short sales were. You know, today most people, because of the foreclosure crisis, have heard about short sales and actually know what they are. But we were doing short sales back in the early 2000s before most people really realized what they were. Well, my role in that business was to negotiate deals with the banks. And I loved it. I built relationships with the various bank reps that I could call them up with a file, and if they didn't have that file, they would go right to the person who did and turn me over to them. And so our whole business was built around those relationships. Well, I started to, a little bit into the 2000s, started to notice a real change in that. And I went to Jim and I said, you know, something's really changed here. It's not the same. I can't work the relationships that I had. I felt like I was just not getting anywhere, that the system had changed. And I actually remember somebody telling me one time, well, if the game's changed, just learn the rules and play by the new rules. Well, I couldn't even figure out the rules because it was right before the first bank bailout. So nobody knew, not even the banking industry knew what was going on and what the rules were. So I felt like here we were in our little business, a kind of a grassroots real estate business here in Florida, kind of starting to feel some of the effects of what was going on in the banking industry. So that caused us to look a little bit deeper for our own personal benefit from a business standpoint, and then it became a personal quest because we realized, wow, from an economic standpoint, things are really unstable. So we decided to ramp up our preps. That was kind of like the spark plug that ramped up our preps for us. So with that, I already had the training from Y2K, had a lot of what I call today my premium products, but went out to get various other things to help prepare our family. This was just a personal thing at this point. We felt like, you know, if we're seeing this in the banking industry in our little community, we better, you know, get some things in store for our family and so forth. Well, I had trouble getting a lot of those things, and so I realized, well, if I'm having trouble, then a lot of people probably are too. So what I did was I opened up dealerships for a lot of these premium products and the things that I knew were the best and were important. So there was one point where we had 5,000 pounds of wheat delivered because we couldn't find it anywhere else. So we actually opened up that account and brought the wheat in. So it was things like that. Well, after we got our own personal preps going along pretty good, we thought about it and we said, you know what? We need to share this. It was like a burden on our heart that we needed to wake up as many people as we could and tell them, what we were seeing from our perspective in the real estate industry and how it led us to look deeper into the economics. And it was, I will say, economics that led us to ramp up our preps at that time. So we had just built our home in a rural community here in Florida, and literally we didn't have much furniture or anything, so we put out folding chairs, invited friends and family, people that were close to us that we could kind of practice on and that would give us honest feedback. Jim and I did presentations. We had a nice little thing here in our home. I think there was probably about 20 people here, just couples, and we practiced on them and we gave our presentation. I think we woke some of them up. Well, from there, we were passionate about spreading the word. And we looked at various means of doing that, going to churches and so forth, and that just didn't seem to work out. Well, we had this opportunity because we were involved in real estate and we had some partners that were very entrenched, involved with the Rich Dad Corporation, Robert Kiyosaki's corporation. We went to an event in Orlando where everybody was there, the Rich Dad Corporation and so forth. And at the time, Mike Maloney had just come out with his book. Mike Maloney runs goldsilver.com right now. Well, we took the chance to have lunch with Mike. Jim and I personally sat down with Mike and we just shared what we were seeing and what our research had shown. And Mike confirmed everything, and we just enjoyed the conversation. But more than that, we invited Mike to come back, and not come back, but to do what I'll call a seminar. It wasn't even a webinar at that point, seminar for us. So Mike agreed to do that. So Mike was in California, and this was back in a time where we didn't have webinar platforms like we do today and so forth. So we kind of Skyped Mike in, and he gave his presentation from an economic standpoint, and we did this in the back of a furniture store that had some seating available, and we invited various people, word of mouth, and I think we probably had 30, 35 at that meeting. And then we had our products there too, the Berkeys and the sun ovens and the various things that you've come to know that are our premium products. Well, out of that meeting, there were several couples who were already meeting as a prep group. And so they invited us to join them. And we started meeting with that group. I think we met every other week for a while in the various homes, and we would talk about the current events. We would try and challenge each other to do various things from a prep standpoint to keep going forward and keep each other accountable. Well, as time went on, we all had young kids and were involved in soccer and everything else that comes along in school events and so forth, so we got busy, and Jim and I got busy back in our business. We went back into the business of mortgage field services. So when the foreclosure crisis hit, we were slammed. We were running crews all over 5 counties here in Florida, and we were just super busy. So guess what? The preps took a back burner. The group kind of dispersed for no reason other than we just all got busy with our lives. Well, fast forward now to October 2012. One of the couples that was in that original Mike Maloney seminar, as well as then in our prep group that we had, asked us to come speak to a small event in a rural community in Seminole County, Florida, right outside of Orlando. And they knew that we had dealerships for these premium products, and so they asked us to bring those as well as just speak on preparedness. That was when I was just getting into essential oils, so I had the doTERRA woman that I was under come and cover that aspect because I didn't have the knowledge myself. We had an ammo distributorship at the time, so we had a representative from that company there too, as well as Gemini. So there were 4 of us. And this was just a 2,000 square foot little community center. And I kid you not, all day we were talking. I didn't even get lunch. I had to kind of sneak over 2 tables over to grab some homemade bread that one of the women had just to get a little bit of something in. So this group, this community group, just advertised this event with little signs out on country roads and then word of mouth. And the hunger and the quest for knowledge was so great. Literally, I can't say, we just didn't stop talking all day long. People wanted to know more and more and more about prepping. And so after that event, we thought, you know what, why don't we bring something like that to our community? We were about 35, 40 minutes away. So with my real estate background and having put on real estate conferences and everything, I thought, we can do that. We'll just do a little one here in our community. Well, one thing led to another. We couldn't find a venue that would be suitable and so forth. So we ended up having our first event in Volusia County, Florida, in Daytona. And it was right off of the I-4 corridor, which many of you have probably heard about during election times. They always talk about the I-4 corridor. But anyway, it was a great location, but we had not 2,000 square feet. It just kind of grew. We had 10,000 square feet. So we had the exhibit hall full of exhibitors, and then we had our speakers. And many of the speakers, you know, from Summer Survival were with us for that first expo. And one of the things that we are really strong about is education. That's, if you read our mission, you can read it at the top of our website at lifechangesbeready.com, or even on the top of our emails that we send out, is that we're passionate about education. And so that first event, it was real important to me to make sure that we got quality speakers who would truly educate people during their presentation. So we had each day like 16 hours of knowledge, of education being given through our speakers. And it was the most rewarding thing. We came home exhausted, but literally seeing couples standing outside our classroom doors going, okay, you go there and take notes and I'll go here and take notes. They didn't want to miss anything. They wanted each of them to be in one of the classrooms at any given time so that they wouldn't miss anything. So after that event, we decided, well, let's do another event. So we did our second event, and that event was in January 2014. We did our second event in November 2014 in Lakeland, Florida, which is right outside of Tampa and Orlando. Same thing. We had, I think it was 18 hours of classroom time going on at that event on both days, Saturday and Sunday. And again, just the hunger and the quest for knowledge was incredible. Well, at that event, there was a journalist that came through who writes for Fortune magazine. And honestly, I think he came through to kind of make an image, make an impression of preppers in his article, and a negative one. Well, I think he was surprised. He sat down with many of our speakers. He saw the expo floor, that it wasn't a bunch of weird people out there doing weird things to prepare for the end of the world. It was just your everyday families walking through, husbands and wives and kids from every walk of life walking through, who were concerned about the direction that their country was taking or whatever took them to our event. So he wrote an article, and it did get in Fortune magazine, and then it got picked up by the Drudge Report. It was on Drudge for 3 days. Glenn Beck mentioned the article on his radio program. So out of that, we started getting calls and emails from all over the country. Bring your show here, bring it there. Well, we looked at that, but then there was an exhibitor at our November Expo who had mentioned something to me. He said, Cindy, I think you can reach more people by doing a webinar series. So combined with people from all over the country contacting us, wanting us to come to various cities, and then having that in the back of my mind, you can reach more people doing a webinar, we decided that we would do the webinar route. And that was the birth of Summer Survival. Now let me tell you a little bit about that. Typically, and if you haven't noticed this, you will now that I've mentioned it, but typically when webinars are done on various topics, whether it's how to eat healthy or there's just any number of webinar series out there, but typically what they do is they do 6 days and they jam-pack it with webinars almost going constantly, and you're not able to absorb it all. And of course they have their product at the end that you can go back and then listen to, but I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted something where people would tune in like their favorite TV show every Tuesday and Thursday night at a pace that people could absorb, think about it, and then come back for the next one. So that's why when we did Summer Survival, we did the 12 weeks every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Now, one of probably the biggest compliments that someone gave me was he said it was like a college course. We showed up every Tuesday and Thursday night, took our notes, went out and practiced, and applied what we learned. That's what we wanted, and that's why Summer Survival was really important to us, and it was very, very rewarding. And I want to thank everybody who wrote in to tell us how much it meant to you, various topics, and we still want to hear that going forward in 2015 too. Well, Summer Survival was such a rewarding experience. Everybody didn't want us to stop, so we took a little bit of break, but then we started up what we called our off season because we felt like we couldn't turn the faucet off, and we felt like there was a need to know a lot more, and the time to get prepared is getting shorter. So that brings us to 2015. Our off season was over. We took a little break over the Christmas holidays, and we wanted to examine where do we go in 2015. Now Jim's going to share with you a little bit about what we see in 2015 and where we're going to take it, but I'll give you a brief synopsis. We, again, want our webinars at a pace that everybody can feel like they can schedule their time around it, and so we're going to do every other week on Tuesday evenings. Now, there are going to be various topics that we feel are important. Some will be, I'm just giving you an update here, some will be what I call product-based. And the reason we're doing that is we've had a lot of questions, there's so much information out there, what is the best thing to get for this or that or whatever. So we are going to bring to you some of the products that will help you in your quest to prepare. I will tell you this, we are going to vet everything that we bring to you. If we don't have personal knowledge of it, by the time we do the webinar, we will. That's very important to us, that we want to put out only the best information out there. Some of our speakers have books and products, some of them don't. So some of our webinars will just be knowledge-based on various topics that we feel are very pertinent, relevant to what's going on in the world at the time. So that gives you a little bit of background of who we are, how we got to doing what we're doing, and Jim will cover a little bit of where we're going forward, where we're at in our personal preps. We're right there with you. We don't have it all done. I don't know that anybody can have it all done because we don't know what we're going to need. We're going to need each other. So we are still working on various areas in our lives that we feel are weak, and we're going to continue to work on those, especially through 2015. So thank you.
Welcome everybody to this presentation tonight. We want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great experience putting Summer of Survival together, and Cindy really talked about how we got here, where we came, how we got started in prepping, and she alluded to the fact that I was going to talk a little bit about where we're headed, and I don't want to do that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit, touch a little bit more on what she termed the watchtower and how we've been tuning in to world events and looking at the geopolitical spectrum for a number of years, probably since 90. I think our eyes got opened up leading up into Y2K in 1998, and I've just stayed tuned in to world events, and frankly, I've watched the slow slide towards tyranny that we're experiencing. We're seeing it played out on the world stage, not only here in America, but on the world stage. Just yesterday, I think Maduro, the president of Venezuela, came out and said that to save the country, they had to move deeper into socialism. And I'm not a socialist. I'm going to go on record here right now saying that I'm not a socialist, that I don't believe in socialism. I believe in free markets and have been an advocate of free market capitalism ever since I understood what the term meant. So as we move forward into 2015, I just want you to know that Cindy and I are going to continue to take the same posture that we've taken over the last several years to stay on top of world events, to stay on top of trends, to seek out those individuals that are subject matter experts as it relates to geopolitical turmoil, to food production, to privacy, how to protect yourself. We've got all sorts of things that we're going to be putting forth in 2015. I wanted to talk a little bit about David Every, and I think we're going to be moving forward with David to have some more concrete, actionable items that you can begin to incorporate into your preps to help you be a little more private, to be a little more aware of what's going on as it relates to the internet and the NSA tracking and all the things that many of you have written in and said, hey, what about this and what about that? And so I just want you to know that we do hear you. We're moving forward. Many of you have emailed in and asked us about the Shemitah. Apparently, many of you are aware of the book, The Harbinger. I've got a copy of it right here. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. It really is a great history lesson in where we are as a country and the reasons that we're here. Jonathan Cahn also had a follow-on book called The Mystery of the Shemitah. I finished reading it about a month and a half ago. It's very good, and it explains from a historical, biblical perspective 7-year cycles and how the Shemitah is on a 7-year cycle. So I just, if you're interested in those sorts of things, The Harbinger is just an uncanny correlation of ancient history and recent U.S. history, down to the very words that were spoken in ancient biblical times, and how our leaders have spoken those very same words with the very same context recently, and what that means for us as a country from a spiritual perspective. I'm currently reading a book right now. It was written in 1973 by David Wilkerson. It's called The Vision. And he made some pretty, at that time, what would have been considered outlandish predictions. Another book that I enjoyed reading was The Coming Economic Earthquake by Larry Burkett. Very, very prescient. I think I'll use the term prescient. Some would maybe use the word prophetic. But these men just looked at what was going on, compared it to trends, and then said, look, if we continue on this path, this is what we're going to happen. This is what's happened in ancient history. This is what we're seeing played out now, and this is what will happen in the future if we continue on this path. And unfortunately, we've continued on that path, and I think our leaders have done it to our own detriment, and that's one of the reasons that we're here, encouraging you all to be better prepared, to be more self-reliant, because if things continue to play out like they are, there's some pretty significant global upheaval that's coming our way. I think we're already starting to feel it in the United States, and it's just all the more reason to be prepared, all the more reason to be gathering information and products and prep items and knowledge. The best prep item that you have in your whole being is right here. It's right between your ears. The more knowledge that you can put up in there about the ancient paths, the ways that your great-grandparents lived. They lived without power. My great-grandparents did. I don't know about yours. My grandparents lived without power up until about 1950, to be honest with you. They didn't have indoor plumbing in their house until 1950. So all of those things are out there. That's just all the more encouragement to be prepared. And I think moving forward, we're going to really part of that watchtower mentality. And I would listen. We're not saying that we're up here on the watchtower, and what we're saying is join us on the watchtower. Join us to begin to look at these global events, these national events. Begin to scour the headlines. Begin to frame it against the backstop of ancient history, and anytime we get to thinking that we're any different than our ancestors, I think that we're deluding ourselves. And I want to encourage you to join us on the watchtower. Many of you have. Many of you send in emails saying, hey, what about this? And I'm encouraged because I'm going, yeah, they're there. They understand. They're awake. And the more you can take this message of self-reliance to your families and your friends, to be a beacon of hope and not fear. I think that's the message that we're trying to portray, and hopefully we've portrayed through the Summer of Survival. One of the things that has really been on everybody's mind here is the falling oil prices. And a benefit of that is we're all spending less on oil right now. I've got a large truck that I use to haul horses and livestock around, and trailers and equipment, and it's got a diesel engine in it, and so I buy diesel fuel, and one of the things that I've recently pulled in the gas station to fill up, and I did it for less than $100, 33 gallons of gas, and I did it for right at 90 some dollars, and I was like, yeah, it's been a long time. It's usually $130, $140, $150 to fill it up, and so that's been encouraging on that side. But the downside of that is the pressure that it's putting on the global economy is amazing. I think that there's a school of thought that says that the Saudi Arabians and OPEC decided that at the behest of the U.S. to try to put some undue pressure on Russia. But the fallout of, if that's true, that is probably having some effect. But it's having residual effect in that Venezuela, a large petroleum producer, a member of OPEC, I believe, is just being decimated. Their economy's in shambles. Another country that's suffering, and many of you probably don't know this, I didn't. I just recently did some research and found out that Norway and all the major oil producers are experiencing pressure. The shale oil industry here in America is basically in shutters right now. The rigs are just being left idle because the cost to produce the oil far exceeds what they're able to sell it for, and so they're just letting the rigs, there's no new rigs going in, and so oil is really in turmoil right now. Many of you follow the financial markets, and this past week we saw the Swiss National Bank uncouple from the euro, something that when they pegged their Swiss franc to the euro, they said they would always do it, that it would be forever from that point forward. And here we are just a few years into that marriage, and they've divorced themselves. They've uncoupled from the euro. The impact this week was dramatic. I mean, the Forex markets were just decimated. I can't tell you the number because I don't think there's a number out yet, but all these Forex trading houses were just laid to waste. They overnight they were rendered insolvent. They couldn't meet their margin requirements to maintain their positions on the Forex markets, and so margin calls resulted in them being insolvent and being put out of business. I believe one of the largest, FXCM, was at the point of insolvency, but they were able to go to Leucadia Bank, and a private investment bank, I believe they're a junk bond bank, and they were able to put together a $300 million loan to backstop them so that they could continue operations. And otherwise they were looking at about $225 million worth of losses overnight. Is this a result of the Shemitah that Jonathan Kahn has talked about? Could very well be. And if we follow the Shemitah premise to its logical conclusions, if we're early in the cycle here in January and the Shemitah climaxes in September, I think specifically September of 13th of 2015, what does that portend? How uncertain are the markets going to get heading into that final culmination? I don't know, how many of you feel about that, but I'm keeping my eye on it, and I would encourage you to look into it, because I think that Rabbi Kahn has made a pretty solid case from a historical perspective, and we would be foolish not to at least look at it as a marker of what may be on the horizon. As we move into 2015, I've used the example of the National Weather Service, specifically the National Hurricane Service, and their cone of warning. They put out a nice graphical interface that you can go to when a hurricane is in either the Atlantic or the Caribbean or anywhere in the Pacific for that matter. And they use their computer models to track where that storm is going, and then they have this graphic that they put out called the cone of warning. And the further away from the eye you get, the wider the cone of warning gets. And I would like to think that if we're looking at the 7-year cycles that we've experienced since 2001 and even before that, but in 2001 we had the World Trade Center attacks, and the following day the U.S. stock market collapsed. And then again in 2008 we saw the Lehman collapse, and again the Shemitah says that 7-year cycle is the marker with which we can do that. And if that's the case, then September 2015 is a pretty significant time. And so we're moving closer to the eye of the storm, and that cone of warning is getting narrower. The National Hurricane Center puts out a written warning along with that graphical warning, and when you get within 24 hours to 36 hours of landfall of a storm, they come out and tell you that if you're in that path that you better be wrapping up your preps. And so I think as we move into 2015, you're going to hear that from us, and you're going to see us make a conscious effort to offer webinars that are going to help you to identify where you are in relation to that cone, and really start to ramp up or finish your preps. Cindy alluded to the fact that we are still weak in some areas, and so that's the focus of where we're working on in the early part of 2015. I take a martial art 3 days a week, and my instructor is always having me work towards my weakness rather than my strength, and my bias is to always work to the things that I'm strong in. And so we're encouraging you to identify your strengths and weaknesses and use those weaknesses as a means of focusing what's left to be done, what needs to be done to finish your preps as the impending storm approaches and as that cone of warning gets narrower. So that's going to be a common thread that you hear from us moving forward. Cindy reminded me that one of the things that Glenn Beck said last year, and has said for many of his presentations, is that the powers that be, the governments, the central bankers, all the people that have influence and exert a lot of control in everyday life, one of the tools that they use is fear and hunger in the people as a form of control. And Glenn has warned us to watch for that. And so one of the things that I'd like to leave you with is to be prepared, be more self-reliant, work towards that, because that keeps you focused on self-reliance and not fear, and it also insulates you from having to go out into a bad situation. If you looked at what happened in Ferguson recently, those people that had to go out or needed stuff put themselves at risk. A couple years, I guess September or October, a couple years ago, the EBT system shut down for 17 hours, and within just a few hours of people not being able to swipe their EBT cards, their welfare cards basically, they started to riot in the stores. And so if you're prepared, you don't have to be in that situation. In 2004, when the hurricanes rolled through, you couldn't buy food, you couldn't buy water, you couldn't buy gasoline because it was all gone, because people panicked and went out and panic bought. And so if you're prepared, you don't have to be there. You insulate yourselves. And a couple of the webinars that we're going to do, I think that the first two webinars we're going to do this year, February 3rd and February 17th, are both related to food and food production. So I want you to tune in because, again, we're headed to the end of our growing season here in Florida, but many of you are in planting stages for your spring gardens, and now's the time to be preparing. And so that's going to be the first two webinars that we put together are related to food production. And so we think that we've got some pretty cool stuff. One of the webinar presenters we went and visited this past Friday, and I was amazed at what he's got, and I'm encouraged and want to wet your whistle a little bit, because I think many of you are going to find it a practical alternative to some of the things that you've been doing, especially those that are in an urban and suburban environment. Typically or historically, as you move towards a more rural area, those people become more self-reliant by virtue of living further away from the grocery stores and stuff. I know Cindy and I live further out into the country, and we've had a garden here for all the years that we've been here. So we've been producing much of our own vegetables and food. So those first two webinars are going to be key to that, and then as we move closer to them, we'll begin to put together the plan for 2015, and we'll begin to reveal what the next segment's going to be. And so just stay tuned, and I think you're going to be really encouraged by what we've got in store. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on February 3rd, I think will be our next webinar. And just thanks for joining us. And again, thanks for your support. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll keep you abreast of all the things that we've got in the planning stages through our email at lifechangesbeready.com. So we're going to shift from Summer of Survival to Life Changes Be Ready. Again, thanks everybody, and stay self-reliant.
Hi everyone. I wanted to come back and say thank you for joining us tonight. We hope that you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about our background, how we got into prepping, and the steps that we've taken along the way, and where we think we're going in 2015 with LifeChangesBeReady.com and Summer of Survival. If you hadn't noticed from our emails, we are merging the two. So your emails will come from LifeChangesBeReady.com. We're going to be hosting our webinars from our main site, which is our main event site, LifeChangesBeReady.com. Let me conclude by saying this. We love what we do. We're very passionate about waking people up, and it's very encouraging to us to hear from you, how you've learned from the various experts and what you gleaned from doing or trying some of the things that we put forward. And so please keep the emails coming. That encourages us along the way. Sometimes it takes a lot to get these productions off from a technical standpoint and just coordinating with various experts and so forth. So your emails are what keep us going. But more than anything, I want you to know that this is a calling that we have in our life, that we are very driven to fulfill that calling, that we feel like we need to wake people up, that the time is short, and that doing the webinars is one of our means of doing that. So we hope that you will spread the word and that you will let others know. Again, as we've outlined tonight, we feel like the time is short, that the fall of 2015 is going to be a very eventful time, and that we're going to try and increase our preps and encourage you to kind of pick up the pace along the way. If you've noticed, I've been signing my emails from the watchtower, and that's how we see ourselves. We see ourselves looking out and relaying to you guys what we see going on and bringing the experts in to help us with that and then show you what you can do to prepare. So thank you, and again, from the watchtower, this is Jim and Cindy Thompson. Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight and allowing us the opportunity to share a bit about why we do what we do. You can go to lifechangesbeready.com and register for the February 3rd webinar. The expert will be Scott Peterson from downtoearthseeds.com. You won't want to miss this webinar on survival gardening. Remember what we said in the webinar: if you can put fear and hunger in the hearts of people, you can control them. Well, join us in February for 2 webinars on gardening so you won't go hungry. I'm your host, Jim Thompson from lifechangesbeready.com, and from all of us here at LCBR, have a great evening, and remember, life changes, be ready. Good night and God bless.